I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I'm really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening and whenever it is that you are listening in. Today's show is sponsored by my good buddy Sid Bush. Just had a chance to run into Sid up at the Marine Corps Marathon last weekend, running the Blue Mile there at mile 12 of the Marine Corps Marathon, and Sid was there holding an American flag as all of the runners ran through that Blue Mile, and saw the pictures lining both sides of the road of fallen servicemen and women, and pretty emotional spot. I was running that race, as I've talked about, for my buddy Sid, who's run over 200 marathons just like that one, honoring our different fallen servicemen and women. So this is a race that's clearly, for many reasons, close to Sid's heart. And getting to see him there at that Blue Mile, Tracy and I getting to stop and spend a little time with him, give him a little hug, and then be on our way towards the finish line. That was one of the best memories of any running event I've ever had, and there's been a few of them now. So that moment with Sid was pretty precious to me, and I'm grateful for my friendship with Sid. I'm grateful for his sponsorship and support of 21047. And so to have you on board with us today, Sid, and sponsoring this episode means a lot to me. And if you, anybody out there listening, are interested in helping to financially fund this mission of mine on a monthly basis, you can do that through Patreon. Patreon is a platform where you can go and just commit to a monthly financial offering, and it goes just to help grow this mission I have that's been put on my heart to use this running journey just to try to bring some hope and light to folks who are struggling in any area of life, certainly running, but just any place in life. I think there are just so many parallels that come from not just my running journey, but just so many stories of folks out there that I try to share. There's just so many parallels from this running journey that we are on to the life journey we all share. So, Sid, thank you for your support. And if you want to learn more about Patreon, you can go to my website, 21047.com. Just click on the Support Me tab, and then you will be able to scroll down and learn a little bit more about Patreon. So today's episode, this is a great conversation I got to have today with Will Turner. Will is a local fella who, this is the year of his 60th birthday, so you'll hear in this conversation how Will got to this point where he's at. But this point is, he is attempting to run 60 Ironman races in 1 year, this 1 year of his 60th birthday. 60 Ironmans in 1 year, just take that all in, as I'm a runner, so running a marathon like I did at the Marine Corps last weekend has taken everything out of me for the last 7, 8, 9 days, just trying to recover from one marathon. Well, Will is running a marathon, a 112-mile bike, and a 2.4-mile swim, all together as one event, on average once every 6 days this year. And I believe as of this recording, he has completed 50 of those as he rounds out the year towards his goal of 60. He's already set a world record, and we had a fascinating conversation about the mindset that goes into taking something like this on, what he's doing to recover in between, and just how this journey is being used by him to try to encourage everybody to find the bold in their life that allows them to kind of step into big challenges like this one he's taken on. So I'm going to turn this over to my conversation with Will Turner. So I want to welcome Will Turner to the 21047.com podcast. Welcome, Will.
Thank you, Keith. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in here in a little bit on this adventure that you've embarked on, 60 Ironmans in 60 days. Typically,
not 60 days. In the year I turned 60. Yeah.
60 this year. 60. Yes. And so a lot of times when I'm talking with athletes on this show, typically they're just runners. You are a little atypical. You're biking, swimming, and running. I'm curious how you got interested in this sport.
In the sport of triathlon?
Yeah.
I swam as a kid, just growing up swimming and on swim teams and that sort of thing. So that was part of my early athletic endeavors. And I took up running much later in life, but after college, I started doing some light running and continued that into getting into marathons later in my 40s, and then took up triathlons somewhere in the middle there. When I was about 34 or so, 35, I did my first triathlon. So I've been doing some swimming, biking, and running for the last 25 years or so.
Curious, which of those events comes easiest to you? Would it be the swimming?
Actually, no. I mean, I'm very comfortable in the water, but if I look at my results from triathlon races and where my standing is in each of those different disciplines, I'm always doing better relative to the competition in my running. So running has historically been my strong suit. But I feel like I don't consider myself great at any three of those, but I'm good at all three of them. But probably running would be definitely my forte. I have run Boston before and had some good luck in my running life.
So at some point, I guess you decided you were going to attempt this incredible feat, in my mind, 60 Ironmans in this year that you turned 60. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
What on earth prompted that idea? And just so folks are listening, because like I said, a lot of listeners are strictly runners, but an Ironman is a marathon, 112-mile bike, and I believe a 2-point-something-mile swim, all in one event.
Yeah, 2.4-mile swim followed by the 112-mile bike, and then you run a marathon.
And so you're doing that. You're doing 60 of them in a year, and so for those who need a little math help, that averages out to more than one a week.
Right. So one every 6 days on average, I have to knock one out.
Yeah. So what were you doing when you decided, I think this is a good idea?
I don't remember the specific moment. I do remember just thinking ahead, and you know how runners think ahead. You think about that next age bracket, aging up, so you get more competitive when you age up, and it's a good thing versus a bad thing. And I first had a thought probably about 3.5 years ago about what would be a big goal when I turned 60. And actually, when I turned 50, my big goal was to do my first Ironman. So that kind of was back there, and I had moved into doing Ironmans to doing ultra Ironman distance stuff. So multiple Ironman, doubles and quintuples and that sort of stuff. So my degree of, insanity just kept going up. And I actually had thought originally that I wanted to do 6 Ironmans the year I turned 60. I thought that would be a huge goal, and how cool would that be? And I mentioned it to a friend of mine, another triathlete, and she immediately said, and she mentioned a local triathlete in town who had done 60 when he had done 6 when he turned 60 a few years ago. And it kind of deflated my bubble. I thought, that's great for what he did. I mean, I thought that was amazing, but I also thought, it's not as big as I thought it was. And when I did my first Ironman, which was in New Zealand in 2009, I had a saying that I used, a quote that kind of kept me inspired, and it said, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. And when I was just playing with what I would change my goal to, and landed on 60. I think I landed on it more because it had a good ring to it, 60 at 60. But it also fit the litmus test of scaring the crap out of me. So I felt like I was onto something at that point.
So give us an update. Where are you on this journey, Will?
I, as of last Friday, I completed Ironman number 47 for the year. So I'm over 70% into this goal at this point, and 13 left to go. And feeling good.
Yeah, well, I got to ask you about that. So I'm 50 I'm 54, and I've been I like to think that more and more in the last few years I've been embracing this idea behind some of your stuff here, this Live Your Bold movement. I'd like to think that I've lived a life in sync with that the last couple of years, and in doing so I've run a couple of marathons, which is really way outside my comfort zone, a whole lot of half marathons. I just attempted a crazy ultra marathon in the mountains of Georgia and came up short. But, one of the things I've discovered is after I do one of those things, it takes a really long time for me to recover, where I feel like, okay, I'm up for the next bold move. So when I was hearing about this adventure that you're on, and 60 is, right in that age range I'm in, my first thought was, how on earth does he recover in 4 or 5 days' time and then somehow pull himself out of bed and go tackle another one?
Yeah. Well, I knew going into this, obviously, that recovery was going to be just a critical part of this journey. I mean, if I don't recover well, if I suffer injuries or other nagging problems and don't recover fully or recover enough, it would be a short year as far as going towards my goal. I'd probably be sidelined and going, what was I thinking? So I definitely tested the waters ahead of time. I mean, like I said, I've been doing bigger and bigger goals since my first Ironman and even since my first marathon. But I tested out 2 years ago. I did about 25 Ironmans. And also, like you, I had a failure in the biggest one I went after. I went after a quintuple Ironman, which is a 12-mile swim, a 560-mile bike, and a 131-mile run. And I ran out of time 6 miles short of the finish line. So I got the bike and the swim in and got 125 miles of the run in before the time bell clicked. But I hope, like you experienced in your Georgia race, that those are the ones that teach you a lot about yourself, and also, and in my case, motivated me to push harder. But having gone through what I went through with the 25 plus Ironman and the quintuple, part of that was just testing my own limits and seeing if my body could recover at a pace that I thought would set me up well for this year. And certainly this year, with doing one on average every 6 days, I'm essentially racing and recovering. And so that focus between each one is, what do I need to do to recover?
I'm curious, has there been one or a couple that have been particularly hard to say, boy, I got to go do this thing today? And then if so, what did you do mentally to kind of get yourself in gear on those tougher ones?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there have been some tough ones, and the recovery that I go through is obviously there's the physical recovery, but there's just as important, if not more important, on all these is the emotional and psychological recovery, to be ready to turn around and do it all over again. So, yeah, I've done a lot, in my own mental conditioning over the years, and I definitely tap into that as I go. And I know if you have this same experience. I think most runners and most athletes have this. When you're doing a big race, like a marathon, you know, the day before you get the race, if not prior, you might get them before the day before, but certainly the day before there's race nerves and anxiousness and some stress that you feel, about that. And I was having that normal race anxiety before each of my Ironmans. And just to clarify for your listeners, obviously there's not 60 actual Ironman races in the world in a year, much less in the States, 60 in a year. So I do a combination of actual races and on your own versions where I'm following all the race guidelines, but I'm, out there against the clock on my own with a witness and my Garmin and that sort of thing versus in an actual race. But I was finding that at the first maybe 2 months of this journey, I would get those race nerves beforehand, that anxiety, and I just would find that I was a little bit more on edge throughout the day and just a little shorter, with my, temperament and everything. And I realized it was race nerves. And my friend in Sherpa kind of pointed that out to me, and not that I hadn't noticed myself, but I thought I had to kind of sit back and go, okay, well, you're doing these every 6 days. That means that you're going to feel stressed out or anxiety every 6 days for a whole year. That's not a good way to live. You don't want to have that going on. So I had to just make a mental shift there. And part of it is having the confidence that you've done this before and you know what to do, and just to, there might be some slight feelings of stress, but if you can shift that into feelings of excitement and at least being more neutral about how you're looking at the next day versus, any kind of dread or, just fear or anything like that you might otherwise hold on to. So I've done ever since then, I've found that the day before I, pretty much feel like every other day. And that's been a real good, just a good thing for my mental health as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Almost every single person I talk with on this show, whether they're runners, triathletes, any other sort of athlete, it almost always traces back to this mental game, which I would have never, I've shared my story often that most of my life I've just hated the idea of runners, and then along with that, or I've hated the idea of running, and then along with that sort of indirectly hated the idea of runners, and then I suddenly became one. And I think the most surprising piece of this is how it has literally changed my mind, just the way my mind works. It's certainly made it stronger. I certainly manage stress a lot differently, and it's amazing. Almost every single person I talk with on here, when they talk about the benefits of whatever they're doing, almost always this mental aspect is first before they get to, physical gains, or I've lost weight, or I feel healthier. Right. So it's interesting that you talk about that and talk about it in a way that's required you to be pretty intentional in the beginning of this to kind of shift that mindset.
Right. And I've done a good job over my athletic career to embrace the mindset of, the pain cave and pushing through. And, that's always a big mental piece as we increase distances or we try to improve performances and race faster. You have to be able to push harder and be able to, suffer through that. And I always felt like that was my strong suit. And I've worked consistently over the last, 10 years to make it a strong suit. But, there's always things that we can improve to just make it the whole performance better and to make the experience better for ourselves, before and after the race. But I've always, I guess what attracted me to the longer distance stuff to start with, I started out doing some 5Ks and 10Ks and eventually worked my way up to a marathon. And then once I got into the marathons and then the Ironmans, I kind of continued on that journey. But I actually I'm not a good sprinter, but I'm a good mid-distance runner. So I could, run a race and end up on the podium for my age group type thing, which is not what my experience with Ironman was. I found that to be much more daunting and not my forte, so to speak, but that's exactly why I've stuck with it over the years, is because it's hard and it pushes me harder. And I find that I end up in that spot where you've pushed your body as hard as you think it will go, and your mind is kind of ready to pull the plug and stop and slow down or whatever might be the case. And it's the ability to push through that moment and get to the other side that I think is the magic elixir of endurance sports. It's because when you do that and you succeed at it, it changes you. It helps to, it makes you a stronger person. It makes you a more confident person. It makes you a more resilient person. And that obviously impacts your performance when you're running or biking or swimming, but it also impacts your performance outside of sport. And, that's what keeps me kind of coming back to this over and over again, to push and see what my limits are, because it has that positive ripple effect through everything.
So as part of this journey, you've embarked on a movement. You have a website, Live Your Bold. And on that website, you said something that, again, it really appealed to me, because I feel like I've kind of in this place in my life, and I want to read this and then let you respond to this.
Okay. Sure.
You said, our goal is to unite all the crazy dreamers, the wild idea generators, and the misfits who have been told what they want to do cannot be done. We want to give a voice and community to those who want to live a bolder life and who want to use their boldness to make a difference. And we want to inspire those who yearn for something more to step into their boldness. When I read that, I wondered if I was hearing a guy who had kind of struggled at some point in his life with stepping into his own boldness, or where this sort of movement came that you've associated with this endeavor you're taking on.
Yeah. I think I definitely gotten more bold as I've gotten older. I was a pretty shy kid, and so I gradually worked my way out of that shyness. But I also, from my own athletic performance experience as well as my other life experiences, have just found that the more I step out of my comfort zone, the better person I become, in the sense of being able to do more and to believe more in myself. And in my professional world, for the last 20 years almost, I have been a trainer and coach, and so the business side primarily. But for the last 6-7 years, I've also been a USAT triathlon certified coach. And so when I'm working with either business folks, salespeople, or athletes, I find that so many folks hold themselves back. We all have, whether we realize it or not, we have these limiting beliefs and things that we think we can't do. And so I have long followed a process when I've worked with clients that is the understanding that when my clients come to me, whether it's for a business and they want to increase sales, or it's a triathlete that wants to improve performance, they generally come to you or come to me with the request of wanting to have better results. And they know that they have to change their behavior. They have to do things differently to get different results. What they don't often realize is that that's not enough, that what we go back to where it needs to begin. We need to start with their beliefs, because their beliefs impact their attitudes. Their attitudes impact what they do, their behavior, and their behavior impacts their results. So it's not good enough just to change our actions, our behavior, because if we haven't impacted our attitudes, if we haven't really gone to the root of what our beliefs are, then those changes are pretty likely going to be short-term, if at all. And so the work that I've enjoyed doing in my career the most is really digging down and excavating in somebody's head, as well as my own head, to really get to, how can we unleash more of our power and potential and see that and believe that in ourselves. And when you do that, it can be transformative. And so that's what I've enjoyed in my own work, and certainly when I read, and I'm always studying peak performance and how do you get there, no matter what your pursuit is. And so it's just a personal passion of mine. And so the Live Your Bold movement really ties in with all those years of professional work and also the athletic stuff to bring what I feel like are my gifts to other people. And that makes this journey, more meaningful and gives it a lot of purpose for myself.
Yeah, I will actually include a link wherever I share this. You have a wonderful blog post that I think was part of the beginning of this, 7 ways to make 2018 your boldest year ever. And you expand on a lot of the things you just talked about, the idea that you must believe, go big or go home. I think you're a shining example of that here this year. I love this whole idea of stomp out self-doubt. Would you say in all of the folks that you work with and encounter that this self-doubt is the biggest hurdle folks have to their boldness, or just one of many?
It may be one of many, but I do think it's the biggest one. It's the one that sets the stage for everything else. Because until we shift our beliefs, we can't make the progress that we may want to make to get to that level of boldness that we have within us. And sometimes that belief is that we don't have it within us. So we've got to, or we don't have enough of it. We'll never be, fast enough or strong enough or have enough time or, whatever other excuses we might be able to throw out there. I'm hoping, I think we all, and what you're doing with this podcast and what you're doing in your own life is a testament that, we can all lead by example. And I am convinced, and hope to lead by example that, we're all capable of so much more than we often give ourselves credit for. And, I've at the luncheon I was speaking at today, I was telling the folks at the luncheon, I said, I was never this athletic kid. I played some little league sports, but I wasn't an athlete in high school. I wasn't an athlete in college. I'm a 60-year-old man who's a very unlikely, world record holder in an athletic event, because I just passed the Guinness World Record, a couple weeks ago, and that's if you were to tell somebody, from my childhood that this is what I was going to do, it would be like, huh? And it wasn't that I think we're capable of so much, and I don't think, age is, I study age and aging athletes. I mean, obviously that's a passion of mine, given the fact that I'm 60 years old. And yes, there are some things that happen with our body as we age, and recovery becomes more important. And, we're not going to have some of the strength or speed that we might have had when we were 20 or 30 years old. But, there is so much that we can do. I mean, I'm inspired by people like Lou, Hollander, who just, at 85 was competing in the Ironman Kona World Championships in Hawaii this past week. He opened up a new age category of 85 to 89 years old. There was a 87-year-old Japanese competitor who actually finished the Kona Ironman. And he had, regardless of age, he still has to meet the same cutoffs that everybody else does, And, there are people out there doing it, which to me gives me hope that, okay, if somebody else can do it, that helps to start to shift my belief. And then I've got to shift my belief to, I can do this too.
Yeah, I say it all the time that I ran my first marathon at Richmond 2016, I guess. But I say it all the time to people who are thinking about running their first marathon or getting ready to, that more than focusing on what I just did after that race, it was this whole door opened up to all these things that I suddenly believed I could do. And
Right.
And it's, people don't quite get the connection sometimes, but I would not be able to do this podcast if I hadn't run a marathon. And it's nothing to do with running. It's just this idea that any fear I had suddenly had gone away. And there's just such this ripple effect once we kind of explore our boldness.
Right.
I get to sit here this afternoon and talk to a guy like you, who's a world record holder, who's out there doing some incredible things. And so you never know, once you kind of step into your boldness, where that's going to go.
Right. Right.
I saw.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, just to put the age thing in perspective, I did my first marathon at age 44, did my first Ironman at 51, and at 60, I broke a world record. So, we've got a lot of life left in us, and I hope to keep going a lot longer too.
In that piece I just read, you talked about this boldness making a difference, and I happened to see, I think it was on your Facebook page, that at your recent run you got to visit a elementary school class, I believe.
Yeah. This is a big part of Live Your Bold and why I'm doing this. I actually, there was a fourth grade teacher up in Messina, New York, that reached out to me through Facebook back in the summer. And she said, I come from a school district in upstate New York. It's very, socially, very economically kind of a tough situation. And a lot of the kids are coming from single family households. There's homelessness. There's, parents without jobs. There's crime and drugs and all sorts of issues that our kids are, dealing with in their home life. And she said, one of the things that she likes to do with her fourth graders is to really focus on them seeing themselves beyond their environment and realizing the potential that they have. And she teaches something that she calls the 3 spires. And it starts with aspire is the first spire, perspire is the second spire, doing the work, and the third spire is inspire, and which I thought was amazing and wonderful. And she said that, she works with her kids to set goals and really tries to get them to understand what grit is. And she'd been following my journey, and she wanted to know if she could use my example with her kids and kind of track my progress and share with them what I was doing. And, we started this dialogue back and forth and started sharing ideas of how, I could help her kids and those sorts of things. And as it turned out, I was doing a On Your Own event up in Vermont last week, and I was about 4 or 5 hours away from the far northwest corner of New York, but certainly the closest I was going to be for a long, long time. And so I contacted her once I realized that and said, you know what, is there any way, and she was, Ms. Hartman is the fourth grade teacher. She was just ecstatic if I could come speak to her fourth graders, and I did. And it was an amazing experience and really what's driving why I'm doing what I'm doing is to have those opportunities and talk to kids and adults. Because again, the message is we have so much more that we're capable of, and just being able to tap into that and step out of our comfort zones, we can lead a much richer and bolder life, which also then has that ripple effect on other people. So it's all part of why I'm doing the 60 at 60.
I'm curious, when you're standing in front of a group of fourth graders, what are they asking you about this journey?
You know, they have the best questions. In fact, at the end of my talking to them, I answered a lot of their questions, but it just so happens that they had all gone through the exercise with their teacher before I got there of writing down their questions for me. And I got to probably 2/3 of the questions in the classroom, but I didn't get to everybody before we ran out of time. And I happened to have in front of me a stack of index cards of some of the questions, so I can tell you a few of them.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, it says, was school easy or hard for you? How did you handle hard times as a kid? What made you choose goals as a kid? What was hard for you to do as a kid? What did you do for fun when you were a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up? What did you enjoy most about school? So great questions, and it really made me think, because I hadn't been in a classroom in many, many years. And so just kind of being in that environment with those kids and putting myself in their shoes and their questions help you kind of look at that and the perspective that gives you. So it was wonderful in the moment, but it's also been really good for me since then. This was on Monday, so it's Wednesday now. So I've had a couple days to digest it. And yeah, it makes you appreciate the whole journey, from being that kid and just, wondering what's to come to being able to look back and see where your path is and kind of see a trajectory of where you want to go moving forward.
Yeah, I asked that because I have a fourth grader, and one thing I know about fourth graders is their questions are usually unfiltered. So when they're asking a question, you're really getting to dig into their minds. And I thought that was pretty powerful, those questions you started reading, that you could hear that, some of them, well, I think most kids that young age, but it sounds like that particular group they're going through some hard times. They wanted to know, what did you do hard when you were a kid, and how did you deal with hard when you were a kid? So it's
exactly,
you were probably a real inspiration to them. So I appreciate that you're out there making those stops and sending this message. And because I tell my boys that all the time, and I hope that's the example. I have 9 and 11-year-old boys. I hope that they, one, see it, and then I hope they listen to me when I tell them that, if I have any regrets in life, which I don't think I have many, but if I would look and say I would do something different, I would have been bolder at a much younger age, because you discover sort of what happens when you overcome your fear. The first thing you discover, it was probably pretty ridiculous, to be afraid
and
of
self-imposed. Yeah, exactly.
So I appreciate you doing that, Will. Where's your next stop then? You've had 3 days rest. Where do we go next, Will?
I'm actually going to do one in Richmond on Friday. We'll do number 48 here. I'm actually, even though I live in Richmond, I have only spent about 20 days in my bed this year, or slept in my bed this year. So I've been traveling all over, but I'm here for a couple weeks before I kind of take on the next leg of the journey, which will take me down to New Orleans. So I'm going to end up doing some in Richmond and in the surrounding area over the next couple weeks before I take off again. So it's good to be home.
I bet. I was looking at your calendar. I need you to tell me this is not so, but I think you're going to tell me it is so. When you go to New Orleans, are you doing 5 Ironmans in 5 days?
That would be the plan, yes. It's called a quintuple Ironman, yes.
Have you done that before?
I've done the continuous. So there's, in the ultra endurance tri world, there are doubles and triples and quintuples and decas, and even it gets crazier than that. But so a quintuple is a one Ironman a day for 5 days. And I've been immersed in this world for about 4 or 5 years now with this ultra endurance community with triathlon side. And when there's never been, this race I'm doing is also part of a DECA race, which if you really want crazy, these are people doing 10 Ironmans in a row. And some are doing a continuous version, which means they're doing all the swimming, then all the biking, then all the running. And some are doing a 1-a-day version. So anyway, it's a group of about 50 to 60 athletes from all over the world, most of them probably from Europe, but from everywhere. It's a pretty small ultra endurance community. But the organizer of this race, it's the first time they've had a DECA race in the United States ever. Most of these races are in Europe or in Mexico. And when the organizers of this race found out what I was doing this year, they were very wanted to support me any way they could, but they wanted me to participate in their event too. So when it's funny, when the guy called me about it, he said, I really want to support you, and I'd like to come, to one of your races. And I said, and I knew about what he was doing already. And I said, well, I'd love to come down, to New Orleans and maybe do 1 or 2 races while you guys are doing your whole thing. And he was like, oh no, you at least need to do the quintuple. And I'm like, well, I really want to pay attention to my body because I don't want to get injured, so I can't keep going. And he said, oh, and this, I'm talking to him about January or February of this year. And he said, oh no, Will, by that time your body's going to be so used to it, you can handle 5 in a row without any problem. And I'm like, I don't know about that. But anyway, the plan is to do 5, but I also have the ability to kind of pull out if my body is not responding the way it needs to. I know it's going to be a tough 5 days, but I'm also going to be with some ultra endurance family that I'm very excited to spend some time with. So we'll see how it goes.
One of the reasons I was just floored by your journey when I read 60 Ironmans in a year was at some point a couple years ago, I read the book Finding Ultra by Rich Roll.
Sure.
And he did he did 7 Ironmans on 7 Hawaiian islands, I think it was, in 7 days.
Right.
And I read that book, and I thought that was just the most unbelievable physical endeavor I'd ever read about. And then, but no, you're going to go do 5 in 5 days. So good for you. Well, that'll be pretty much, will that be right around wrapping it up time, or will you have a few left after that?
I'll have just a few left after that. I mean, if everything stays on schedule, that will probably be number 52 through 57. So then I'll just have like 3 more to hit my 60 goal after that. So.
You sound a lot like me, Will. I always have to have something since I've got into this running journey and then started embracing some of the testing myself and seeing what I can do. And I'm not in a good place really when I don't have like that next big thing out in front of me, that next bold step. Have you thought about what is next, or are you just so wrapped up in this right now that that's just the furthest thing from your mind?
Yeah, it certainly ideas have crossed my mind, but I'm not focused on it right now. I'm definitely just focused on getting done what I need to get done. It was funny today at the lunch event I was at, somebody said, what happens at 70? And in the triathlon world, a half Ironman is the distance is 70.3 miles. So it already crossed my mind. I can do 70 half Ironmans when I turn 70. So who knows?
Yeah, no, you seem to me to be the kind of guy who's going to need to do something at 61. So I'll be curious. It didn't go unnoticed to me how quickly this whole thing changed when you had heard somebody had already done 6 and you were not going to be comfortable with that. So
yeah,
with that as a foundation and you seemingly needing to kind of exceed, I can't wait to see what's going to top 60 at 60. So
yeah, I'm not sure either. I might have to yeah, who knows?
You might you might want to spend a year trying to set some sort of napping record or something. I just can't imagine the recovery process. But
Yeah, you know what? The one thing I'm really looking forward to next year is, when you're training for a marathon. At least when I train for a marathon, I part of being an older athlete, a more mature athlete, is I don't run more than 3 days a week if I'm training either for an Ironman or a marathon. Typically I'll do a speed workout with some interval training and that sort of thing, and I'll do a tempo run, and then I'll do my long run, and I'll do some strength training and that sort of stuff in between, and whatever other cross training I'm doing. But in this journey, because I'm essentially going from one long, I call it my long day in my outside office, because I'm out there for anywhere from 13 to 17 hours in a day type thing. But I'm essentially doing the long endurance stuff, and I'm actually really excited to get back to doing some speed work, because it'll be a year since I've done any. So I'm looking forward to being able to do some things that I can't do now just because of time commitments or wear and tear on my body that it's not prudent to do right now.
absolutely. Do you do anything then? I mean, you just race and then rest. Is that absolutely it? Nothing the other 5 or 6 days?
Pretty much. I mean, I'll do some light workouts and I'll do some active recovery stuff. If I'm not, a lot of this journey has been traveling from one place to another, and I've spent, I've been driving to all these places 'cause I'm carrying bike and all the gear, so it's not, it's more affordable. Plus, it's just practical. I've put over 55,000 miles on my car this year since January. So, and the year's not even up yet. I'll probably have about 70,000 on it by the end of the year, if not more. So I'm spending a lot of time in the car, which doesn't give me as much time to do the stuff I'd like. But walking and active recovery, a little strength workouts when I can. But for the most part, to your point, it's do a race and recover and do a race and recover. The last group I had up in New England, I had 3 races within 8 days. And that was because I had travel schedule and work and other things I had to balance. And that, so I had to cram more in a shorter time period than I normally would, but that just is the way it worked out that last week. So sometimes I don't get as much recovery time as I'd like, and I'm spending a lot of time in the car instead.
I'm glad you threw that in there because, that's a piece you don't even factor in that, certainly, yes, an Ironman every 6 days is pretty daunting. But then when you factor in all the travel and, just the trying to adjust a work schedule, I mean, that's been a long year for you. Yeah,
but it's gone very quickly. I can't believe we're already, approaching. Well, we're in mid-October already, and it just, for so long, it just seemed like the year had, I had so much more to do, and now that I'm coming into the home stretch, it's like, wow, we're almost there. The year's flying by. So, but it has been a lot to juggle just to make sure that I'm getting it all in that needs to get done. But it just becomes your new version of reality.
Right. I've seen a lot of local coverage. I saw a news story. Actually, somebody sent me the clip of your local news story, and they anytime anybody sees somebody fascinating that they think I might want to, or they want to have me interview, they send me these sort of suggestive links. But I'm curious, when it's all said and done, have you been journaling, or I see you've got your blog. Any plan when this is all said and done to wrap this up in a nice, tidy story of any kind, or are you just going to move on and just go with your memories?
No, I definitely want to chronicle it. I'm a writer anyway. I do a lot. I write a blog and write articles, and I write a lot professionally. So that's always been something that I was interested in. And certainly since I started the journey and got more people following me on this, there's been two outcries from people that are out there cheering for me, and one was totally unexpected. My Sherpa, Chris, if you've seen on Facebook and stuff, I mean, he's taking these amazing pictures at all these wonderful and epic locations we're going. So there's been this cry, and literally certainly every week and almost every day, somebody saying, "Oh, you got to put together a coffee table book with all these amazing photos and all that sort of stuff." And neither one of us had thought about that on the front end, but certainly the demand has been, people want it, and that's been really fun. And I was, I've like you, I mean, I've read, Rich Roll's book, but I, probably just about every book on, for runners and triathletes. I'm a crazy reader, consumer of all that stuff. And so I'm inspired by that. And I think I've got that's one of my goals for 2019 is to kind of put all this down into a book format and put it out there.
Yeah, well, I'm a big reader too, and especially some of the same line of reading you do. So I'll be in line. I just can't imagine all the lessons and the inspiration and insight you have to share. It's been a good conversation. So I know, and I agree 100%. I saw those pictures the other day from up in the Northeast. Wow, what beautiful pictures! Yeah,
just amazing. Chris does a fantastic job, and he's been he's helped lay out a lot of my On Your Own courses, and he's got a penchant for and has traveled a lot, particularly out west, and he's a big cyclist. And so, as I've been planning this journey ahead of time, he's been saying, "Oh, you've got to go here and here and here and here, and I've got just the route for you." And it's funny. One of the obviously with the On Your Own stuff, I'm paying attention to weather to avoid just the extremes that you don't want to get caught in, that sort of stuff. And we were headed from somewhere along the central coast of California, and we're headed towards Lake Tahoe for the next event. And we were looking at the forecast for the weather as we were starting our drive, and it basically showed rain all week long. And it's like, that's not great. And then within 2 minutes, he's like, "I know what we can do." I'm like, "What?" He said, "We can do Ironman Grand Canyon." And I'm like, "What?" I said, "Where am I going to swim?" And within 2 minutes, he's on his phone looking. He's like, "You can swim in Flagstaff." And Flagstaff is 80 miles from Grand Canyon. But the good thing about this journey, with the Ironmans is I've got to bike 112 miles, so I could swim in Flagstaff, bike 80 miles to get to the Grand Canyon National Park, finish the last 32 miles in the park, and then do my run up there. And so I'm running along the rim of the Grand Canyon. He's taking amazing pictures. And I mean, that's been part of this journey, is just going to all these places that, you normally wouldn't be able to race or run in, and just having these epic backdrops as my inspiration as I'm going along. It's like, this is great, to be in these wonderful places and be able to push myself and have that experience has been really a really fun part of the journey. Of course, I always remind them that I love them and hate them, because the more epic and beautiful it is usually means more elevation and the more climbing I have to do on the bike and the run. So he's working me really hard to get to these epic views.
That was going through my head. We were out at the Grand Canyon about a year ago. And so when you said that, I thought, I'm not so sure how big a favor that was.
Well, you got to take the good with the bad. So, yeah, I've climbed a lot. My climbing legs have gotten a lot stronger this year, that's for sure.
And I'm curious, Will, you actually made me think of a question in there. I know when this was an idea, you probably had some general expectations of what this would look like and how this would all turn out. What has been the most surprising benefit of this? Something that you did not see coming that has really had an impact on you in this journey?
That's a really good question, Keith. I think the most heartwarming thing for me has been the people who have come out and either virtually or in person been there to support me in different ways that in any way that they could. I've had people that were total strangers who have offered me, their home to stay in, or offered me, cooked a meal for me, or, just been there cheering for me or running alongside me on the run part of my Ironman, or, those sorts of things. And, that part has just been an amazing part of this journey, is to have that kind of support and to have the people reach out like they have. It's been really nice.
It's amazing. I interviewed Maggie Seymour was her name, and as last year at some point she ran. She was a Marine, ran across the entire United States in 100 days, and I'd ask her some variation of the same question, and her answer was along those lines, which kind of caught me off guard. But her answer was basically that there are a lot of good people out there. That was the discovery she made, because she ran through a lot of, she planned routes that went through rural America, small town America. And so she just said she just left really, really encouraged that in spite of a lot of what we hear, there are a lot of good people out there.
Yeah, I'll tell you. You have time for a little story? I'll tell you.
Absolutely.
So I was up at Lake Koocanusa, which I'd never heard of before this year. It's in the northwest corner of Montana. Had just done an Ironman at Glacier National Park and was up in Montana. I actually have a friend, a coaching buddy, and somebody I coached before that lives in Maryland, but his family has a cabin up in Montana that doesn't get used a whole lot. And he knew I was in Glacier, and he said, if you want to use the cabin, it's available. And I thought, oh, great, and we had a free place to stay for 3 or 4 days, and I'm going around in this little teardrop camper with my buddy Chris, and it's cramped quarters and not all that comfortable. So for people to open up and give us some place to, a home to sleep in, it's like, yeah, yes, we'll take it. And that's happened over and over again. But anyway, so first off, Mike offered us his cabin, which was amazing, and then was talking to him about, setting up the course there. And he said, well, you can swim in Lake Koocanusa. This was early June. And I have a wetsuit, but I have a sleeveless wetsuit. And I talked to Mike about it before. I said, and he said, oh, my sister from Utah goes to the lake all the time, and they swim in the lake all summer long. And so I'm like, okay, if people swim in it, I can do a Ironman in it, swim in it. Anyway, the swim was really, really cold, even in a wetsuit. But I had a sleeveless wetsuit. I came out of the water, and Chris, who's my Sherpa, was taking a little video, and he thought he was just going to take a video of me coming out of the water and saying something to the camera type thing. And I was like on borderline hypothermic, and I was shaking, and I couldn't stand up. And it was just a moment where I looked like, it looked awful. It looked like, what is wrong with this guy? And we put the video on along with the rest of the post for that race. And, we both, Chris and I, got a big kick out of it afterwards. And people were just like some people were just horrified that, the condition I was in after I came out of the water. And somebody had some comments that were like, Will, why aren't you wearing a sleeved wetsuit? And I'm like, well, I don't have a sleeved wetsuit. And, with this whole adventure, I'm spending, as you can imagine, lots and lots of my own money and race and drive, all the stuff. And, I didn't want to spend the extra, $500 to $800 on a new wetsuit when I had one, that was going to work in 90% of the cases I needed. So anyway, unbeknownst to me, a friend of mine in New Zealand saw the post, reaches out to a Blue 70 wetsuit distributor in New Zealand, who then gets in touch with the headquarters in Seattle. And I'm told via email to contact this guy named John in Seattle about maybe getting a wetsuit. And I've had this happen a number of times where, as far as sponsorship or people giving you stuff, I early on in this venture, I think people maybe weren't completely believing that I could do this. So when I would approach people, I didn't get much positive response from, that kind of thing. So I thought when I reached out to this John guy, I thought he's going to be somebody in marketing who's probably going to just say, sorry, we can't help you. But, anyway, turns out John is the CEO of Blue 70, and he wanted to know, what my size was and where he could ship a new wetsuit to me, immediately. So within a few days, I had a brand new wetsuit. And it was because a friend in New Zealand contacted another guy who contacted another guy who got it to me, which, pretty amazing,
Yeah, your story is just one of many why I refuse to be a social media hater. I know there's just some negative stuff out there, but listening to you tell the story of, without social media, you don't get to stand in that fourth grade class. We don't get to hear some of the beautiful questions those kids ask. Wetsuits coming from New Zealand. We're a big world, but it is as small as it's ever been.
It really is. And people want to help. And that's, I think, the gist there is just like your other athlete told you, that, they're just the kindness of people to go out of their way has been really just very heartwarming and gratifying and humbling. It really has been a big, just bonus that has come with all this.
Well, Will, I'm appreciative of your time. I know you've had a busy day. You've had a busy year, but I know you've had a busy day with some speaking. So I'm really grateful you gave me this hour. What a inspirational conversation. And on behalf of everybody listening, man, I just wish you the best of luck the rest of the year. What we figure, you got 12 more to go?
13 more to go.
13 more to go. So best of luck with those 13. And I, for one, look forward to a couple things, reading this book you'll write, and then I'm probably more intrigued to see what's next, because like I said, you seem to be
the pressure's
a guy
on now, isn't it?
Well, I know like I said, you seem to be a guy, there's going to be no greater pressure than coming from within.
Well,
so
that's very true. Very true.
So, Will, thanks. I hope you have a great day, and thank you again so much for being so generous with your time.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation that Will and I shared. It was a blessing to me just to be able to spend some time with him. He has a crazy busy schedule. He had spoke to a group that morning and then came on and had that conversation with me. So I'm first and foremost grateful that he would take the time to share this journey with us. Just lots to take away from it. Live your bold, right? A lot of the conversations I have are encouraging people to overcome challenges in their life by really a lot of times just discovering this bold that they have within them. Will talked a lot about some of the hurdles that come between us and discovering that bold. So I hope if you listen, maybe you just found an avenue to your own bold, and you'll find a way to go tackle that here soon. So I appreciate Will come on. I really appreciate this idea of, as we get older, there's still a lot of bold left in us. I'm 54 myself and certainly see the aging coming a little bit more every day. So he was really inspirational to me from that standpoint. So we wish Will luck as he embarks on these final 10 Ironmans. Talked about the quintuple 5 in 5 days. I just shake my head. Can't even begin to fathom that. So what a journey he's on. And again, I'm glad we all got a little time to share in it. So I thank you for listening in today. I'm grateful for you listening, and I hope you will come back next time. More fascinating conversations to come down the road. But until then, I hope you all, if you're running, get out there and run hard. A lot of us big week for many of us, the Richmond Marathon coming up. Lots of folks come to town for the big Megs Miles family reunion, the Megs Miles supporter Facebook group that I belong to. So lots of folks coming to participate there. So if you're running, run hard this week. Big part of our group is we're going to cheer some people on. So if you're not out there running, cheer somebody like Will or some of these folks tackling big first-time races this weekend. Go cheer them on. And if you're not a runner, well, I hope maybe this will set something in your heart to get you out there to run, or maybe join Will, do a little swimming, little bike, and just get something going to get out there and discover the bold in your life. You all have a great, great week.